The storm didn't ask permission before trapping us together. It slammed the door on our pasts and dared us to survive the night. By the time the last road vanished under white fury, my strict, untouchable boss and I were sharing one bed, one fire, and a truth neither of us could keep buried. Snow had a way of changing everything, especially when it came sideways and thick, swallowing headlights and confidence alike. I'd grown up in winters that tested a man's resolve, but this one felt personal. The lodge was supposed to be a quick stop, coffee, directions, a laugh about the weather. Before I drove her back to the city meeting, she insisted we couldn't miss. Instead, the power lines bowed, the road barricades came down, and the owner handed us a single key with an apologetic shrug. One room, one bed, no refunds. She stood at the threshold like she was bracing for an argument she fully intended to win. My boss, precise, commanding, sharp as the crease in her tailored red blouse, surveyed the room with an expression that could make subordinates confess sins they hadn't committed. The lodge smelled of pine and old wood. A fire crackled, determined and small. The bed was broad, neatly made, impossibly singular. "This won't be a problem," she said, setting her bag down with surgical control. No, I agreed, even as my mind listed all the ways it might be. It won't. I was a single dad, widowed young, responsible by necessity, not choice. At work, I was known for punctuality and patience, a dependable presence in meetings and crisis calls. Around her, I became something else, aware, careful, quietly bracing myself against the gravity she carried without trying. She ran the company like a chessboard, seeing 3 moves ahead, never wasting a glance. And yet, there were moments, rare, unguarded, when I caught a softness she didn't know she revealed. A pause before an order, a sigh when she thought no one noticed. The storm howled louder, rattling the windows. I added wood to the fire and shrugged off my coat, shaking snow from my hair. She watched me without comment, eyes flicking to my hands, then away. I told myself it was nothing. We settled into a tense truce of politeness. She took the chair by the fire with her laptop open, as if work could somehow keep the snow at bay. I leaned against the window, watching the world disappear inch by inch. The silence grew heavy, not awkward, exactly, but charged like the pause before a difficult conversation you keep postponing. "My son," I said suddenly, surprising both of us. "He hates storms, thinks they're loud because they're angry." She looked up. "How old?" "7. I smiled without thinking. "He says the snow is trying to cover the world so it can sleep." Her lips curved before she stopped them. "That's sweet." The fire popped. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, something eased. We ate from the small kitchenette. Simple food, shared plates. She declined wine. I made tea. The rhythm of ordinary things steadied us. When the power flickered and went out, she inhaled sharply, then straightened. "Backup generator," I said. "It'll kick in." It did, but the light stayed low and warm. Shadows softened the room. She loosened the top button of her blouse, then froze, glancing at me as if daring me to comment. I didn't. I focused on my mug, on the steam curling up like a promise. Later, when the fire burned low and the wind finally found a steady, relentless cadence, we faced the unavoidable. The bed. She set her bag down on one side, precise lines drawn in the air between us. "I don't snore," she said. "I'm a light sleeper." Her eyebrow arched. "We'll manage." We did at first. Fully clothed, backs turned, a polite gulf of space maintained by sheer willpower. I stared at the ceiling, counting breaths, listening to the storm scrape its nails along the walls. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by thoughts I didn't invite. About her laugh, quick and unexpected. About the way she said my name when no one else was around, like it mattered. Sometime in the night, the fire died. The cold crept in, subtle and insistent. I felt it first along my shoulders, then my hands. I shifted, pulling the blanket tighter, careful not to cross the invisible line. A shiver answered me from the other side. "Are you cold?" I asked into the dark. A pause. Then, softer than I'd ever heard her voice, a little. I weighed the options, the rules I lived by. Professional boundaries. personal restraint. The fact that my son trusted me to make good decisions. The storm didn't care. There's more blanket, I said. We can share the warmth without. Okay, she said quickly, cutting me off. Yes, that makes sense. We turned toward each other, movements cautious, deliberate. The space between us narrowed, then vanished, replaced by shared warmth and careful breathing. Her shoulder brushed mine. She stilled. I stilled. The world held its breath. Thank you, she murmured. For what? For not making this awkward. I smiled into the dark. We're both adults. Her laugh was a whisper. That hasn't stopped people before. The generator hummed. Snow whispered against glass. Time stretched. The warmth helped. The closeness did something else entirely. I became acutely aware of her, of the way her breath evened out, of the faint scent of cedar and something citrus. She shifted, and her hand found my forearm, fingers curling reflexively before she realized. She didn't pull away. I forget, she said after a while, that people have lives outside the office. I didn't tease her. It's easy to forget when you're carrying everything. She was quiet long enough that I thought she'd drifted off. Then, I didn't plan to be like this. Like what? Alone, she said. In charge. Tired. I turned my head slightly. In the low light, her face was softer, unguarded. You don't have to be alone. Her eyes met mine, searching. You say that like it's simple. It's not, I said, but it's possible. We lay there, the words settling between us, heavier than the snow outside. She shifted closer, the line gone now, replaced by trust, or perhaps necessity dressed as courage. My arm curved around her without thinking, protective and steady. She exhaled, a long breath she'd been holding for years, and rested her forehead against my chest. For a moment, I imagined my son asleep at home, dreaming of a world covered in quiet. I imagined tomorrow, roads cleared, power restored, rules reasserted. I imagined letting go. The storm pressed in, relentless and patient. Inside, wrapped in borrowed warmth and unspoken understanding, we listened to it rage. And somewhere between the howl of the wind and the steady beat of two hearts, I knew this night would change us, whether we wanted it to or not. Morning didn't arrive gently. It announced itself with a pale, uncertain light pressing through frost-laced windows and the distant groan of wind finally loosening its grip. I woke before she did, body stiff from the careful stillness I'd maintained most of the night. Her head rested against my chest, hair fanned across my shoulder, breath slow and warm through the fabric of my shirt. For a moment, I let myself stay exactly where I was, suspended between what had been and what would inevitably follow. The storm had passed, but its consequences remained. I shifted just enough to ease the ache in my arm. She stirred immediately, instincts sharp even in sleep. Her eyes opened, focused, then softened when she realized where she was. The realization followed, the bed, the closeness, the night that had quietly rearranged something fundamental between us. Good morning, I said softly. She inhaled, then straightened, composure snapping back in a place like armor. Morning. We separated with an efficiency that bordered on professional. She smoothed her blouse, retied her hair. I stood, stretching, giving her space. The room felt different in daylight, smaller, more ordinary, stripped of the intimacy the dark had allowed us to pretend wasn't real. Outside, the world lay buried under a flawless white sheet. The road was still impassable. The lodge owner confirmed over a crackling radio. At least another day. She nodded once, absorbing the information. We'll make use of the time. Of course she would say that. Breakfast was quiet but not uncomfortable. We moved around each other with a new awareness, a careful choreography. Every so often, our eyes met and lingered a second too long. Neither of us commented on it. Later, bundled in coats, we stepped outside. The cold was sharp, clean, almost holy after the chaos of the night. Snow clung to branches like secrets. The silence was profound. I used to come to places like this, she said unexpectedly, boots crunching beside mine. Before everything became deadlines. With someone, I asked, then immediately wondered if I'd crossed a line. She shook her head. Alone. I like the quiet. It didn't expect anything from me. I smiled. Quiet has a way of doing that. We walked until our breaths fogged the air and our shoulders brushed naturally now, without apology. She stopped near a clearing, gaze fixed on the horizon. You're different outside the office, she said. So are you. Her lips curved faintly. I suppose I am. The word we didn't say hung between us, fragile and electric. Back inside, the fire was relit, the day stretching long and undefined. No meetings, no emails, just time. Time did what it always does. It peeled back layers. She asked about my wife, carefully, respectfully. I told her about love that arrived early and left too soon, about learning how to braid hair and pack lunches, about grief that never fully leaves but changes shape. She listened, not as my boss, but as a woman who understood solitude. I learned about her childhood, about parents who demanded excellence and offered approval sparingly, about how control had become safety and ambition a shield. I don't know how to stop, she admitted, staring into the fire. If I'm not moving forward, I feel like I'm failing. I considered her words, the weight behind them. Rest isn't failure. She looked at me then, really looked, as if seeing something she hadn't known she needed. You make it sound believable. As evening approached, the lodge owner announced that plows would arrive by morning. The end was in sight. So was the beginning, if either of us was brave enough to acknowledge it. Dinner was warmer than the night before. Laughter slipped in, tentative at first, then freer. When the fire crackled loudly, she startled, then laughed at herself. I reached out instinctively, steadying her. This time, neither of us pulled away. The second night was different. No excuses, no lines drawn in the dark. Just two people choosing honesty over fear. We talked late, voices low, bodies close but unhurried. When she rested her hand over mine, it felt inevitable rather than forbidden. I thought of my son, of the example I wanted to set. Not perfection, but integrity. Care. Truth. This changes things, she said quietly. Yes, I agreed. It does. Are you afraid? I was. But not of her. Only of pretending it didn't matter. She nodded, eyes shining. I don't want to do that either. Sleep came easier this time, shared without pretense. When morning finally arrived, for real, bright, decisive, we rose knowing the world would resume its demands. The drive back was calm, roads cleared, silence comfortable. As the city skyline emerged, she spoke. At work, she said, choosing her words with care, nothing changes unless we decide it should. I glanced at her, and outside of work, a pause. Then, outside of work, I'd like to have dinner with you. Somewhere that isn't snowed in. I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. I'd like that. We returned to our roles, but something fundamental had shifted. She still led with authority. I still followed with competence. But now, when our eyes met across a conference table, there was understanding there, earned, not imagined. That night, when I tucked my son into bed, he asked if the storm had been angry. No, I said, brushing his hair back. I think it just wanted to remind people to slow down. He smiled sleepily. Outside, the world was quiet again. Not empty, but full of possibility.